Hi, I'm Jack Danahy, and I am the Worldwide Security Executive for the Rational brand within IBM Software Group. I was formerly the founder of a company called Ounce Labs that IBM purchased as part of the Rational team in late July of 2009. And prior to that, I founded another company called Chiave Technologies, which did kernel-level security, which was sold to WatchGuard Technologies back in 2000. I've been doing security for a very long time. I think a lot of people make a mistake when they separate things like compliance from individual topics like application security. One of the big drivers we see in a number of markets, whether it's financial services, retail, or in fact in energy and utilities, is that the changing nature of the compliance and regulation that people are looking at is causing them to reevaluate application security. I'll give you an example. When I look at financial services firms and the data that they control, a lot of people think about things like PCI DSS. When you think about the data security standard associated with credit card information, most of it is talking about data that gets controlled inside of applications. And so when one thinks that they're trying to be compliant with something like PCI DSS, what they really mean is that they're trying to make their applications compliant. So the emphasis on application security is not so much a divergence from the earlier emphasis on compliance, but it's a maturation of the compliance so that people understand better that what they're really identifying is weaknesses within applications. In developing markets, things like energy and utility, where IT is a new entrant, right, in many forms inside that market, you're starting to see the compliance and regulations from here in the States, people like the NERC SIP, being developed with language that talks about software and software security. Now, it isn't as specific yet as you'll find in things like the financial services regulations because the industry is not that far along yet. But I think what you'll find is as more of these compliance efforts happen and as more of these regulations get passed and as people start thinking about them more, it's naturally going to come back to application security. For many years when we talk about security, we've always told people that it's not about bolting things on. It's about understanding security from the beginning. A lot of small firms overestimate the difficulty of understanding IT security because they're thinking about it as a separate topic completely. Most small organizations understand their clients really well. They understand their systems because frankly they're paying for them, and those expenses are a big part about the way in which they do their business. And so the understanding of their IT security really starts with understanding their business. You can create a much smaller footprint of issues to be concerned with if you do a much better job of understanding the data and the applications and the services that you actually care about. I'll give you an example. If I'm a small software company and my application has a limited number of uses because it's just not that big yet, I can spend my time in understanding better where I'm likely to do things like put proprietary data, take information from customers, deal with a back-end financial system, and thereby limit the number of things I have to worry about when I'm worrying about my IT security. So really where it starts is helping executives and business leaders inside of small businesses understand that security is not something different from what they do. It's an intimate part of understanding the way they do what they do. I was a computer engineering student in the early and mid-1980s. Understanding security from the perspective, particularly of internet working, was something that was really pretty foreign back then. So what we start with is a series of systems that have been developed over the last 10 to 20 years by experienced software professionals who were never really versed in security techniques, nor in understanding the priority of making a lot of these applications secure. Why? Well, because they never expected them to undergo the pervasive internet working that we see right now. So to start, a lot of the most experienced folks in the space and a lot of the software that's been written to date just wasn't conceived of with that level of knowledge of security. So what ends up happening is as organizations begin thinking about application security and they begin thinking about ways in which they can embed security knowledge earlier, it can be pretty daunting. I think the reason why you see some folks not jumping right on the bandwagon is because they're not just looking at how they're going to get their new applications to be secure, but they're trying to figure out how they get a baseline. How do they get that underlying application on which so much is based to be secure enough to be built upon? And I think that when some people, some organizations, face a challenge that's that daunting, the natural inclination is just to do nothing at all and sort of to pretend it doesn't exist. Now, on the converse of that, there's a lot of hungry young developers and there's a lot of curious older developers who'd like to understand how to make the code more secure. I don't think anyone likes finding out that the software that they wrote is insecure, but I also don't know very many people who don't enjoy learning about better ways to do their jobs. And so what we find is one of the natural outgrowths of people doing the style of assessment that we do in terms of understanding the vulnerabilities inside applications is that they upskill the people who are actually doing the work. It only takes an engineer 1 or 2 times fixing the same kind of bug, whether it's an input validation problem or a timing issue or a buffer management problem, and then they don't make that mistake anymore. And so what ends up happening, the job for the developer and the job for the tester is no longer how am I going to find these things and react to the problems. It's how can I make sure that they don't enter the software in the first place. And what ends up happening naturally is not only do the problems that exist get solved, but it's a natural artifact that you're not generating as many new ones. A lot of the choices we make in our lives, where we decide to have dinner, where we decide to raise our kids, where we build our houses, where we go to work, are choices we make based on things like the neighborhood, things like the other folks we see in that neighborhood. We decide what the right level of environment is for us to live. Data privacy for us as individuals isn't so different than the protection for our physical selves. Many times, organizations which are interacting with our private data work hard to make sure that they protect it. They have their own relationships with their own providers, their own businesses. And so we are always going to be at least one arm's length away from really protecting our data. Mostly the best that we can do is we can interoperate with vendors who we respect. We can take advantage of the security mechanisms that are provided, whether it's passwords or smart cards, what have you. But at some point in time, we have to trust. We have to trust the organization. And we have to trust that if the organization does something wrong, that there are means within our reach to remediate it. A couple of examples. Most organizations are now going to be subject, when it deals with private information, particularly financial private information or health-related financial information, with some series of regulations. No matter what country you live in, there is an organizing body inside a government somewhere that actually cares about whether you're protected, about whether your data is protected. In case of financial systems, the organizations themselves have a lot to risk. There's a lot at risk there. If information is stolen from them, and they lose that position as a trusted provider of services, they're going to lose the business as well. So while we as individuals stand in a place where we're making decisions upon whom we're going to do business with based on our own sense of what's best for us, we shouldn't ignore the fact that these organizations are trying to make similar decisions, and decisions which sometimes can be even harder for them because they have to make decisions among thousands of users and thousands of business partners. So long as everybody recognizes and government regulations try to inform the process of keeping data secure, I think we're going to be all right in the long term.